your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I have a very special guest coming your way, sharing with you some information. You know, this program deals a lot with family. It deals with community. It deals with connection with one another, relatives, and so on and so forth. And our guest is going to talk to us a little bit about that in regards to addiction. Art Dielhenn is my guest, and addiction is a family disease. Art, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Richard.
You know, I often tell the story of my family, not dysfunctional, at least not in the classical way. Let's put it that way. There were 6 kids and 2 parents, and my parents almost made it to 62 years of marriage. My father passed away a couple of months prior, and we grew up in a house that was 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. And there were 5 females. So
wow.
Obviously, I survived, as did the others. And I often use the term that, we weren't exactly the Norman Rockwell family, but yeah, I'm going to say pretty close. Because, there was something about my parents that shared many, many things with us to help us to live and work and play together, and grow together to where, we are still, I consider ourselves still very close, a close-knit family. And as far as I know, from my perspective, there has never been any estrangement. I'm 65, so, and I have one older sister, had one elder sister, but she also passed. And then I have a younger brother and 2 younger sisters. That is the kind of dynamic that can create all kinds of problems. Where does this addiction, I don't know, it sounds like a strange question. Where does the addiction come from?
That's a good question. I think the addictions come from many different places. Some are genetically inclined. Generation after generation after generation. Certainly in my family, that's been true. In my ex-wife's family, that's been true. I believe a gene for addiction has been identified. If you have family members who have addiction issues, you're something like 4 times more likely to have them yourself. I think addictions also happen as a result of trauma. Early childhood trauma in life, not being able to cope, having mental illness problems. There's a high correlation between addiction and mental illness. A lot of people um, with psychiatric or psychological issues will self-medicate because it's too painful otherwise. And so they'll, eat, go to food or go to alcohol or go to drugs, or there are all sorts of other addictions, power, there are many, 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 many addictions, shopping. Um, so um, I don't, it's interesting. I've thought about this question for a very long time, and I've decided it doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not a family is willing to face it head on and understand that it's not just the identified addict that's got the problem, that the whole family that surrounds the addict uh, starts to react differently and live differently to cover for the addict or to help the addict or to shun the addict or to take care of the addict, to fix the addict. The whole family system starts to react and convulse almost in new kinds of ways. And one of the reasons that I wrote this book is that I felt it was so important that everybody understand that it's not just the addict. I've heard many addicts say, "Well, I wasn't hurting anybody." Well, that's not true.
Hmm.
What you're doing is hurting everybody around you, because all of them are reacting differently as a result of your addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason I wrote the book is because I think that not just addicts deserve recovery. I'm been in a recovery program for 8 years because I have addiction in my family.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I learn how to cope with my own feelings and my own sense of dysregulation and my own sense of fear about what's going to happen? How do I deal with the loss of a loved one who's an addict? I mean, look at the things that have happened in the last 10 years in terms of Oxycontin and
Hmm.
now fentanyl. I mean, there are families all over this country who are losing family members, and all of them are suffering terribly. How do they recover?
Yeah.
Um,
It's a challenge. There's no question. It puts a strain, of course, on individuals. And I will tell you that though I have not, well, this is kind of hard to say only because I'm not sure it's true. But I
okay,
don't have an addiction. At least I
okay,
don't have the kind of addiction that you might see on the surface. All right.
okay, all right,
I know that there are those who have addictions to work. I mean, they call them workaholics.
right,
That's one thing,
yeah.
and so forth and so on. Would you say that every human being has an addiction of some form of some form or another at some level, high or low or another? But that
Oh
we
boy,
all have them. It's just that we don't see them as addictions. Those of us who consider ourselves, and here's another word that sounds kind of strange, who consider ourselves normal, whatever the heck that means.
golly, what a good question. I've never been asked that question before, and I honestly do not know the answer. I know that we all have proclivities. I know that um, we all have things that are more important to us than other things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the important thing about in identifying addiction is it hurting you? Is it hurting others?
Mm-hmm.
Are you back in the back of your mind? Do you think, oh, I might have a problem with this?
Mm-hmm.
I, let's talk about pain and pleasure.
Okay.
We are we're pleasure seekers, right? We run from pain and we run to pleasure.
Yeah.
If we're in a great deal of psychological pain or physical pain or some sort of emotional pain or spiritual pain, we're going to seek some sort of solution for that. Now, some people find solutions that are appropriate. Others uh, find solutions that may be appropriate in the short term, or maybe quick fixes.
Mm.
Let's talk about food, for instance. You
Okay.
know, when if I'm upset or rattled, I'm a chocoholic. I love chocolate. So I'm liable to say, okay, I got to get a chocolate bar. Or I need chocolate. And um, as as addictions go, that's not a horrible thing. I can modulate that and regulate that. But still, I notice that there's that impulse to find pleasure, to find
Mhm.
something to ameliorate whatever the pain is that's underneath all of it. So I don't know if we all have addictions. I think we all seek pleasure and we try to get away from pain. And hopefully, the way that we do it is to um, find something that can soothe us and help us. Maybe we decide to go talk to a friend. I'm having this problem. Can we talk it through?
Yeah.
Maybe if you're having a spiritual crisis, you go to church or your guru or, whatever the solution is for you around that spiritual conflict, and you sort it out. Um, I think that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it,
Well,
but
now,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, you have been
Yes,
involved in Hollywood
yes,
for a number of years. You're
yes,
referred to as an A-list producer and so forth. Um, and we are inundated. There
yep,
are two programs nightly, Monday through actually they're Monday through Sunday, but they're reruns on the weekends. Two programs that tend not always to focus on the. We'll start with proclivities of the people in the entertainment industry, and I'm talking about Inside Edition and Entertainment Tonight.
right,
And both of those programs, I don't want to leave TMZ out, but needless to say, it's almost as if that industry, in and of itself, seems to lend itself to addiction, or it draws to it. The industry tends to draw to it people who have, shall we say, we'll call it the proclivities that could lead into addiction. Um, and then there's the third possibility that the industry sort of creates addicts through the process of them doing what they do, and in most cases, I'm just speculating here, uh, becoming very wealthy very fast. And there are other people in the shadows who want to take advantage of that wealth by getting them involved in certain kinds of addictions. And it may not necessarily be stuff that you take into your body. It could be gambling. I mean, and of course
right,
that also is in sports and so on and so on. What
sure.
do you think? Am I off base, or do I have a case before the judge, so to speak?
Uh, well, at the risk of hurting your feelings, I think you're off base.
Okay.
I,
No, no, no. You
and
don't hurt my feelings. I'm here to learn
no,
too.
okay. I think the reason it seems so obvious, the reason you may have that sense is because Hollywood is built on imagery and Hollywood is built on promoting itself, and it's in the public eye constantly. So I think there's just, let's say the widget factory. Now the widget factory isn't being promoted the way a movie in Hollywood is. And there's that old saying, uh, it doesn't matter what kind of promotion it is, good or bad, it's all good,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know what the figures are, but I don't think that Hollywood has any more addiction than any other industry uh, in the country. Uh,
Then it's,
athletics,
yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
primarily how it's been, I'm going to use the word, how it's been exploited by these kinds of programs.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that exploitation again is a matter of marketing
Hmm. Yeah.
and exposure, and those shows. I don't know what I can tell you about those
Yeah.
shows. I don't watch them, and
I
I
understand.
had nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
I was a
Well,
family sitcom director. That's what I did for a living.
speaking of which,
Yeah.
I am on the verge. A matter of
Yes.
fact, I have an interview scheduled with two. They're well-known actors, but they go back to my childhood. I have the opportunity of speaking in not too long from now. The woman, and I will have their names down, but the woman who played Nasty Nellie in Little House on the Prairie, and then the gentleman who was Laura Ingalls' love interest in the series.
Okay. Okay.
Now, I haven't heard, and I don't know if this had a lot to do with Michael Landon's influence on what was going on, but I have never heard of any of the actors being involved in anything like what we've been talking about. And it's like there was something in the air when they were on the set or in the studios, or maybe the people that they picked as the actors as well. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I would watch the program as a kid, I'd tear up. I'd cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, wow, this is really incredible. And apparently there's going to be a reboot, which is going to be very interesting as well. Um,
Production in television and film is grueling, grueling work.
yeah.
People see all the promotion and everything and the Hollywood parties and the this and that. I never went to a Hollywood party.
Hmm.
I worked in LA for 25 years. I never went to a Hollywood party because I was working 14 or 16 hours a day. It's absolutely grueling work, and you can't sustain that kind of a lifestyle on drugs for very long or alcohol for
Mm,
very long. Um, but it that's the misnomer is we get caught up in the mythology and the
yeah.
marketing and the BS and the this and that, and what we don't realize is that these actors showed up on the set maybe as early as 5 or 6 in the morning for makeup and did
Hmm.
3 hours of makeup, and then we're shooting all day long, and then might have to flip the next day to a night shoot, and it's just grueling, grueling work, and it's best to be sober when you're doing it. Now, could these people in some way be considered workaholics? Was I a workaholic? Probably. I loved it.
Hmm.
And it was compelling. It compelled me, and I loved it. And at some point, as I aged, it became too much for me, and I backed off. And I'm happy I did.
Mm.
But the work's very challenging. So, and you can't. I mean, I saw people come and go. I saw actors and actresses and production people come and go because they had a psychological problem or they had a medical problem or they had a drug problem. And those folks didn't last long because you can't do that kind of work at that level for very long and do it. So all of a sudden you see that somebody's been recast in a show. Well, something happened, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, and I'm not going to cast aspersions, but something happened.
Mm. Yeah. We're going to continue this conversation because this is fascinating. I want to talk about the aspects of not only recovery, but also the the challenges of intervention and that type of thing as we continue talking with Art Dielhenn. He is the author of A Family Addiction is a Family Disease, and it is available through the website. I'm sure it's on Amazon as well. Addiction is a familydisease.com. We'll be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, along with Art Dielhenn, and we're talking about his latest release, which is Addiction is a Family Disease. Let's talk a little bit about, first of all, recognizing. Can we talk a little bit about how? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, and we talked about our proclivities. All right,
Yes.
not
Yes.
addictions, proclivities.
Yes.
If I'm even asking the question, I wonder if I'm addicted to, I probably am. Is that a fair assessment, or how do I determine, once again, and let's maybe get into some specifics, how do I
Yeah.
determine whether I have an addiction to something?
Well, I think that first thing we talked about. If you have a sense, it's sort of like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this, or I shouldn't be drinking this, or I shouldn't be popping this pill, or I should go home and have dinner with my family and not stay till midnight, or I shouldn't be at the casino.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very hard to be logical with an addict because addiction is not logical.
Mm.
So, in other words, you can't speak to an addict very often because they don't want to hear it. You can you you can tell, and there's a slogan in one of the programs that basically says you can tell an addict you can't tell him much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are signs from the outside that are warning signs that people on the outside can notice, and these are important because if you're let's say a manager in a company and you have a employee that's was a great employee, very
Mm-hmm.
productive, always on time, and all of a sudden that employee is late, uh, maybe even pattern lateness, like Monday or Friday, means right. They're drinking all weekend, or using drugs all weekend, or partying, or doing whatever they're doing, gambling all weekend, and they need Monday to recover before they go back into work.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an employee or a family member who all of a sudden, used to get good grades and isn't getting good grades anymore, if whatever standard they set
Right.
in their sort of normal routine changes to any degree, their sleep pattern changes,
Mm-hmm.
their irritability level changes, being tardy or late. All of these are signs that something's going on.
Mm.
I know there's a nicotine ad running on TV where the kids are screaming at the parents, and it talks about nicotine addiction.
Yeah.
And boy, when you start to notice that kind of stuff, then you know that something's gone, and you can confront it.
Yeah.
Whether or not you can do anything about it, that's the difficult part.
Yeah.
Because again,
Go
you can't talk to an addict rationally, because that addiction is not a rational thing.
Yeah.
Addiction is like playing football with, it's like rollerball. There are no rules. There's no time limit. They switch the end of the field constantly.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're in the game or out of the game, and there are no helmets.
Yeah.
So you're banging your head against the wall all the time, and
Literally.
and most of the time nobody's listening.
Yeah.
especially the person that's afflicted with
Yeah.
some sort of addictive issue.
Have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
I have not seen Idiocracy.
And I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a scene of the skyline. Now, the scene in the skyline is in the year 2555. And when you talked about how the addict shifts from their standard to something else, like grades, straight A's, and then all of a sudden it's dropping off to C's and D's. Well, these high rises, they go up, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 floors, perfectly straight, beautiful looking high rises. But from the 60th floor on up, they zigzag back and forth the structure of it. And when you mentioned that, I'm going, yeah, I think that around the 60th floor, whatever the year was when they were building it, 25, 50 or whatever, they must have been on something because how the building, first of all, is still standing because of this zigzaggy pattern, I don't know. But that was the thought that ran through my mind. When we and I will tell you that I've been fortunate that in my family, as far as I know, all right,
Right,
as far as I
right.
know, we none of us, as we were growing up into our teens and 20s and beyond, and then the sisters go off and marry, and my brother, and so
Yeah,
forth. There were no addictions that were pronounced. Everybody was productive. Everybody was taking care of themselves and their families, checking in with mom and dad to see how they were doing as they were getting into their retirement, and on and on and on.
that's great. I mean, you're fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's estimated that close to 50 million people in our country have an addiction. 50
Wow.
million, which is about 16.5% of the population.
Yeah.
Those are the people who have the addiction. But what about the 7 or 8 people their closest friend that surround them?
Mm-hmm.
All of them are reacting to this addiction. So I don't know if I mean, I'll bet you know somebody or have a friend who knows somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's got somebody in recovery or has got somebody who's on the streets or has somebody who's in jail or
Yeah.
has somebody who's died.
Yeah.
It's like we all know somebody who knows somebody.
So is there um again, I don't want to minimize the individual aspects of all of this.
Right.
But is there a technique? Is hey, look, your mother and I, your brother and sister and I mean, your friends and da da da. We love you so much, and we da 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 blah blah blah. Or screaming and yelling, and you're an idiot for doing it, and you need to get your crap together, and on and on and on and on. Or somewhere in the middle, intervention. Can we talk about that? Because there are some of these sitcoms today and in the previous decades that addressed intervention, and it never seems
Right.
to go real well, especially if it's in a comedy, let alone a drama.
Right.
And of course, a comedy, they're making fun of this kind of thing, although nowadays I would think that probably wouldn't be real appropriate, but be that as it may.
Yeah, there's nothing funny about it. But go ahead. Sorry. Finish
Well,
your
I was just going
question.
to ask you to talk about this aspect of intervention, one-on-one, family, get the stadium together of all of the family, friends, relatives together to talk to the one person. Because I'll just share this briefly. I was in a personal growth program back in the 90s with my first wife,
Okay.
and we came in from lunch and they darkened the lights and all the chairs had been moved out. And my wife and a couple of the facilitators were sitting on the floor and they said, "You need to come over here and sit down." To which my wife then shared with me things that I didn't have a clue
Right.
about her.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there going, my first thought was, and you're doing that here and now amongst all of these people, which we had already been with for 3 nights and then half of a Saturday. So
Right.
we were all very close, as you know, these programs get that way.
Yes. Sure.
And I was so, I'm going to say I was so angry, but I sat there
Right.
and I listened. And when she was done, I got up and walked out. because it was like, you have got to be kidding me. First of all, you did this in front of all of these people, and you put me in this position of, what am I supposed to say to this?
Right.
And then it was, as I began to process it over the few moments I was out in the parking lot, uh, wow, I never knew that these were things she was dealing with. And of course, I softened up and the anger dissipated and so forth. But an addict doesn't have that kind of a reaction. Again, I wasn't the addict and she was sharing with me. But nonetheless, in an intervention, it's kind of like that. That's what it was, sort of a reverse intervention, I'm going to say, of sorts, where she was not comfortable sharing with me privately because I don't know what she thought my reaction was going to be.
Well, was she sharing about herself, or was
Yes, it
she
was about
sharing?
herself. It was about
But
herself.
what?
So it's
But
not
was it
exactly the same, but it's still that same dynamic where you have a group of people who want you to get help. And she's sort of turning it inward towards herself, that she needs to get help, which is why she was in the program in the first place. Um, but let's turn it around in terms of an intervention. Do those usually work well? I mean, as far as your experience is concerned?
um, I'm I don't know the answer to that.
Have you ever done them?
No.
Okay. So that's
Yeah,
not one of your
yeah, sure. Yeah, well, yeah, I have. Not a big intervention like that, but I've tried to talk with um, people in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in programs now for 10 years, so I sponsor people
Mm-hmm.
and I talk to people. And, there's a lot of resistance to give up the thing that gives you pleasure,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the thing that masks your pain. There's a
Mm.
lot of resistance to that. And a lot of people think, well, honestly, I was like, I couldn't imagine not drinking when I quit. It was like, um, how am I going to live without, a couple glasses of wine at night? I was never a huge drinker, but I drank every day. And I quit because I had small kids and my wife suggested it. Um, and it was like, wow, what's life going to be like without a glass
Yeah.
of wine at night, or a beer, a couple of
Yeah.
beers, or a
Yeah.
glass of scotch? And it's very hard to conceive of giving up the thing that gives you pleasure.
Yeah. So
But
I
as
would,
they
you would
go ahead.
disagree with the quote. This is quoted to Taylor Swift to alcoholics, that one beer is okay, but two you don't want to go to.
Right. For alcoholics can't stop.
Yeah.
Alcoholics can't stop. So, one is one is never enough,
Yeah.
and a
Exactly.
thousand is too many. It's like here's what I think works. I think that um, an alcoholic talking to an alcoholic works.
Mm-hmm.
I think a cocaine addict talking to a cocaine addict works. I think that a gambler talking to a gambler works. I think that, and this is one of the reasons I wrote this book, is because this book really is not about addiction. This book is about recovery
Mm-hmm.
and the principles of recovery. Um, a lot of recovery programs tend to be very siloed, right? They have their own little silos and they
Right.
don't communicate with each other, and they're secretive because these programs are all anonymous, right? So it's very hard to get information, and most people write about addiction. Most people don't write about recovery. And what I wanted to do was share general principles of recovery so that anybody could have access to them. Um, and I'd love to talk more about recovery because it's a brilliant phenomenon, and it's life changing,
And
and
that's what
it's
we're That's
Excuse
what we're
me.
going to do when we come back. Okay. We're going to do that.
Okay.
We're going to remind our listeners, though. We're talking with Art Dielhenn. He is the author of Addiction is a Family Disease. Addiction is a Family Disease.com. That's the website we will be linked to as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and Art Dielhenn is my guest, and it is a challenge. I mean, I have heard the phrase um, screamed at an addict by their partner that alcohol will destroy the relationship. I mean, literally screaming into the other person's face, which I know is not productive, but at the same time, the supporter, if you will, the partner, was at their wits' end. They just did not know what to do next. Let's get into that area of recovery, and I hope that at the same time, as you talk about recovery, you will also share with us your process that you have been through. You just mentioned that you yourself have dealt with your own addiction and obviously within your own family as well. So let's start there with and I'm actually going to ask a question on the end result. Is an addict ever recovered, cured, no longer an addict? Is there ever a point where they say that, or that it's accurate?
In my humble opinion, no, it's
Okay.
not accurate. Um, Addiction to a substance or a behavior, the addiction is not actually to the substance or the behavior. The addiction is in one's mind. It's our thought process and our thought patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And if the key to recovery, I mean, when I stopped drinking, I stopped on a day. I stopped on December 26, 2014.
Wow.
That's the day I stopped drinking, that day. And I've not touched alcohol since. Am I still an alcoholic? Yeah, because my thinking is alcoholic.
Mm.
Am I still going to get in trouble? Am I still going to not be rational? Am I still going to want to drink? Am I still going to want to find other ways to seek pleasure? Am I still going to it's all about our thought patterns.
Mm-hmm.
It's an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And
Is
that's why I stay in recovery and I stay in the middle of the herd. I stay in recovery. I go to meetings, I have sponsees, I write books, I talk about it. It's part of my life. It's not my whole life
mm-hmm.
because I've written other books that have nothing to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
But um, but in order to stay emotionally balanced, psychologically balanced, it behooves me to stay in recovery. And at first you think, well, God, I'm not going to have the time to do that. It's going to be such a pain in the neck. It's going to be horrible. I remember I asked my sponsor early on, I said, how long do I have to keep going to these meetings and do these readings and stuff? And he said, until you want to. And
Mm.
that there's a tipping point in recovery when it's like you're fighting recovery, fighting it because you want to go back to whatever the behavior was. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a second. You wake up one day or you wake up after a year or 6 months and you go, wow, I just feel great.
Mm-hmm.
I've never felt so great and I'm not afraid anymore and I don't feel horrible and I'm not hungover. I'm not going to the casino. And all of a sudden there's this tipping point that's happened
Yeah.
and now you're in recovery and you want to be there and you want to stay there because the alternative is too dangerous otherwise.
Mm. To me, it is certainly a challenge, obviously, for the addict. It is also almost as equally a challenge for those who are around the one who is addicted.
Yes.
And And certainly we can get into that, but let us dive into the whole aspect of recovery here, as you've laid out in your book. And I am only guessing here that the first step in recovery is that the addict wants to recover.
The, yes, and I think there's something that happens before they want to recover, and that is that uh, they hit bottom. They hit this moment when they almost killed somebody in a car accident, or when the police pulled them over and they got a DUI, or when they're at the casino and they drop $100,000, or when you go to the doctor and you've been eating so much that your cholesterol levels through the roof, and the doctor says, if you don't stop eating, you're going to die of a heart attack in the next 2 years. There's that point when, remember before I said addiction is not logical, therefore you cannot talk logically to an addict. It's in that little space, that little moment of time, when for some people the light goes on and it's like, oh, I see it now. I see it. I see what I'm doing to myself. It's the first logical moment, right? And it's
Mhm.
brought on by intense pain, and it's brought on by um, this spark of realization. And many addicts have that spark of realization and say, I'm never going to drink again. And then 5 hours later, they're at the bar getting hammered. Other people go, I'm going to call and go into recovery right now, or I'm going to call a friend of mine who I know has a gambling issue and see if he can get me into Gamblers Anonymous. Or I'm going to call this place and tell them that I need a rehab because I know that there's a mess happening. So there's first that bottom, which is very important, and that moment of awareness, and then you're right. It's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. The pain of the solution has become larger than the pain of the problem,
Mm.
and now I need to find a different way. And once you decide to find a different way, everything changes
Mm.
for the
Uh,
better.
we'll continue talking about recovery, but I want to ask, you talked about how you'll always be in recovery because the brain is wired in the way that it is. Do you believe that it might be possible to rewire the brain so that you're not always thinking that well, I'll refer to them as those addictive thoughts?
Absolutely. The brain is plastic.
Hmm.
Neurologically, what happens in recovery is it's behavioral. But first, it's about thinking. And as you subscribe to the principles and practice those principles systematically, your brain starts to change. And the neural pathways, you start creating new neural pathways. For instance, when I used to go to the grocery store, I would always walk down the alcohol aisle. Right now, when I go to the grocery store, I don't have to walk down the alcohol aisle.
Hmm.
But it took me a while, and then what they started doing was point of purchase displays of alcohol all over the grocery store, right?
Oh, yeah.
And right, they'd spread it out all over. So it's like, remember, folks, alcohol will help you with your pain because we're going to put this red
Yeah.
wine display over here. And for a while, I would go by that red wine, and I could taste it. I'd salivate, and now it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, but it's taken me a lot of work and a lot of recovery to get to that point. But I think our brain and our neural pathways and our dependence on stuff changes in our mind. I do. That's my experience.
Yeah. You have sponsored people
Yes.
in the process. Uh,
Yes.
how long have you been in, and I guess the term is in program?
10 years.
And do you know how many people you've sponsored?
Maybe 20
Hmm. And
in multiple programs. I'm in two programs. One for myself as an alcoholic, and then one for family members who have addiction issues.
mm, when I'm curious about one other thing, and
Yeah.
we'll continue on with recovery about who were you before your addiction
Oh,
and who are you now? And what's the difference?
I used to be afraid all the time. Even in my directing career, I was afraid.
Mm,
I was afraid of everything. Um, I was short tempered. Um, I I felt in pain all the time. I didn't feel worthy. I had low self esteem. Um, I wasn't always honest.
mm,
A lot of white lies. Or lies of omission. Um, I was still a perfectly functional person.
hmm
I had a great career. I did well. Um, but as I look back on it now, and this always amazes me, is how much psychic pain I was living in. And I don't know why. There are lots of reasons why, I guess, but I've stopped worrying about why. The only thing I'm concerned about now is how can I live better? Uh, how can I live a full life? How can I live a life that's not fearful? How can I be honest about even the things I'm afraid to tell people? Um, it's uh, it's a whole different life.
mm.
And as a result, I never thought I'd write books. I'm on my third book now. I'm dyslexic. I did horribly in school. I couldn't spell my way out of a paper bag. It's like I think my SATs, I got like a 480 in English.
Mm.
I had comprehension issues, dyslexic, all the kind of stuff. I thought I never thought I could do the things that I do now,
Mm.
and it completely changed my life. I'm not afraid anymore. I see beauty in everything. Uh, I'm honest. There are promises in some programs that are they're kind of wonderful, and um, I should get them and read them to you, but I don't know if we have time for that.
Well, if you'd like to, we can certainly take the time. We've still got some time left here on the clock. I'm just fascinated by um, the people that I have associated with over the years in my career in broadcasting and producing of audiobooks and radio theater back in the 80s and early 90s when I was in my 20s. God, what a great experience that was. And I can't even imagine. There's one reason why. Number one, in school, when I was in school, I knew that my classmates, some of them, they were into, different drugs, pot and so on and so forth. And it wasn't because it was illegal, it was wrong. I just didn't have an interest in it. And over the years, I've come to the realization that the other reason is because I don't like being out of control. I've never liked going to parties where everybody's just boozing it up. I will have a beer or two once in a while. I've got my favorite mixed drinks, da 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 da. I just don't like being out of control.
I agree with
You
you.
know,
And I and
especially,
I
go ahead.
and and I didn't either, which
Yeah.
I think saved me
Hmm.
because I didn't like that either. So I never drank. I rarely drank to excess.
Mm,
But as I said, I drank every day.
yeah.
And but I didn't like being out of control either. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until the day that I woke up on a sidewalk at 4 in the morning
Oh.
that I realized that I had lost control. It's interesting. Addictions are progressive.
Hmm.
So I quit drinking about 25 years ago at my wife's suggestion. And she was able to talk rationally to me. And it was because we had young children and I agreed with her. And I didn't drink for 15 years. I was not in a program. And after we separated, I moved into my own apartment and I thought, well, I wasn't really an addict. So I'm gonna start cooking with wine again and I'll have a glass of wine. And 9 months later, after going to a bar that I'd been to a million times and had sparkling water and lime, I walked up to the bar and ordered a gin and tonic. I had no defense against that first drink. And then
Mm,
I had a second drink, and then I woke up on the sidewalk. And
mm,
my addiction had, in that 15 years, had grown even though I wasn't drinking. And
mm.
why is that? My organs had changed. You know, they were older. They weren't processing the alcohol at the same rate of speed, blah, 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 blah. Um, and that's when I got into a program the next day.
Mm. Wow.
And so con- control, that was my bottom, right? When I realized that I had finally completely and utterly lost control.
Art Dielhenn is my guest. Addiction is a family disease. It is addictionisafamilydisease.com is the website. We certainly hope that you will make it your goal to go there and to find out more about the work that Art is doing because he's been involved in this and has been sharing with us here for the last 40, 50 minutes. And we're certainly grateful he's been doing that right here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host here on Tell Me Your Story. And Art, this is a subject that has to be talked about, and it is being more and more talked about. That's one of the reasons why I realize there's a lot of consternation over what we went through during the pandemic at the beginning of this decade. I get that. At the same time, I'm glad we went through it. Not for the loss of life, certainly, but for the fact that we started a conversation nationally, if not globally, about mental health and wellness. Not mental illness,
Right,
okay? About
right.
mental health and wellness. And addiction is part of that conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as I said before, there's a high correlation
Hmm.
between mental illness and addiction. Um, you talk about the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, and I sat down and I thought about being in my apartment for a year and a half by myself. I thought, Art, you're going to go crazy. Uh, you, you better figure this out because this is going to be crazy. And that's
Yeah.
when I decided to write my first book called Get Out of Your Head. It's a Mess in There. And
Mm.
I basically wrote about aphorisms for better thinking, better health. And and then that led to this book. Mental health is challenging, and I come from a family again with mental health issues. My brother had it, my father had it, uh, my son had it. You know,
Mm.
it's and they also had addiction issues. So again, it's a family disease and a
So,
generational disease.
so let me ask you about the relationships that you have with your family members, from obviously your father on down to your son, as well as other siblings and other relatives within the family unit, aside from just the parents and the children.
Um, well, my father was So what specifically would you like to know?
Well, I'm
I don't
curious.
have,
I'm curious as to whether, uh, because obviously with addiction, rifts can develop between
yeah,
siblings. I mentioned earlier that I'm grateful that we didn't have those kinds of estrangements due to anything. We had our squabbles, our quarrels, but we worked them out and we moved on, and we continue to this day. I'm
right.
curious as to those kinds of relationships with your son, your father, your siblings, etc., aunts and uncles for that matter.
Yeah, they were all a struggle.
Mm.
My relationship with my father was a struggle. I was in uh, recovery for 6 months before it occurred to me that my father might have been an alcoholic.
Mm.
That's how in sort of denial I was. Yeah, my dad was a difficult guy. I knew that he had epilepsy. I knew that he had had some brain trauma early in life. I knew that he was odd, you know. Um, um, and I knew that he drank. I mean, I'd go to lunch with him and he'd have a couple martinis at lunch and then drink 3, 4, 5 ounces of bourbon at night, which was nothing. It was
Hmm.
a cocktail hour. That was the norm.
Right.
But now that I look at it, he must have been hammered all the time. I mean, if I had drunk that much, I would have been out of control every day. I don't know how he did it. Um, we had a very challenging relationship. My brother and I had a very challenging relationship. I've had a very challenging relationship. I don't want to talk about my sons because it's really their story and I don't
Hmm.
feel
I understand.
comfortable. Um,
Absolutely.
um, but I did lose one of my sons 4 years ago to dual diagnosis, mental illness and addiction. And so it's devastating, man.
Yeah.
It can be devastating in a family. And um, if there's anybody out there who has a family member with an addiction, I really encourage you to get help, to talk to somebody who knows something about this and help sort out your own reactions to it and your own emotional chaos around it. Because as we talked about, Richard, it's chaotic, it's not logical, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And all we want to do as normal, organized, productive, logical people is to have a logical answer for it. And there's no logical answer. I think that's the most important thing to understand.
Mm. It has been said that the people around the addict or the person dealing with mental health issues,
Yes.
the people around the individual have to, as much as they care and love for this person and want to get help for them and on and on and on, they have to remember they've got to take care of themselves. Because if they don't, they're no good to the person they want to help.
Yep. The analogy that we use is, if you're at 50,000 feet and, the oxygen goes, put the mask on yourself first, and
Hmm.
then put the mask on your lover or mother or father or son or daughter or the person next to you, right? Um, you can't be, because being around addiction is so emotionally fraught and so emotionally crazy making. Um, the person around the addict, by virtue of being next to the addiction, becomes sick too.
Mm.
I lived with my son who passed for a year, and by the end of that year, I was in the hospital,
Mm.
right? Because it made me sick.
Yeah.
I couldn't take it anymore. And so, and we know the caregivers sacrifice themselves for their loved ones, and it's not always a good outcome.
There could actually be an addiction right there
It is
where
an addiction.
the caregiver, yeah,
The
I,
caregiver's addicted to fixing the addict. It
yeah,
is an addiction,
yeah.
very much so.
And it is very hard to step back and say, look, I've done all I can do. you now must make the choices that are going to bring you out of, and I love from Robert Bly's book, Iron John, the word for what you referred to at the beginning of the program, bring you out of your catabasis or bottom of the well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so,
Exactly.
and that's,
But
that's hard.
it's almost impossible. It's certainly not in the parenting handbook. The parenting handbook says parents will take a bullet for their kids.
Yeah.
The lover's handbook, you got to be a hero. You've got to save that person. Be a hero. I mean, that's so. But again, it's you're being asked to do the impossible, and that
Yeah.
struggle between what you think is logical and expected and what's actually possible is huge, and
Yeah.
it's not. So I've had to learn to step back and give people around me the opportunity to live their own life.
And I would venture probably the hardest decision that a caregiver might have to make is bye-bye.
Yeah,
I can't stay anymore.
right.
Here's my number. Call me when you make the choice to choose to live. And
Yes.
that's what my book is about. I have a book called Choices, 5 Steps for Life. That's the first step. Make a
Mm,
choice. But you just very well said this whole process is not logical. So that decision of making a choice is going to have to come after they decide that, I found myself out on the sidewalk at 4 o'clock in the morning. This isn't working for my life.
no.
And I got to do something different. As a
Right.
matter of fact, I guess you could even say, because I love Einstein's statement that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, addiction is, it's a form of insanity, isn't it?
It is. And trying to fix addiction, the loved one's attempt to fix the
Yeah,
addiction is its own form of insanity
yeah.
and its own form of addiction.
Mm,
Like I'm addicted to my kids. I'm addicted to fixing them. I'm addicted to helping them. I'm
yeah.
addicted to helping them survive. Well, so what? I mean,
I, and
right?
again, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and it's not a dispassionate. So what? It's a
No,
very passionate. I love them, and when they're ready, they'll do it, and not until.
no.
Yeah.
Right,
We're
right.
talking with Art Dielhenn. The book is once again Addiction is a Family Disease. I pronounce it that way because that's how I learned it over the years I've been interviewing with people. We talk about disease, and it's like, no, it's actually dis-ease. You're not at ease. And that's
Correct.
why I pronounce it that way. Addiction is a family disease.com. That's the website we will be linked to as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Art Dielhenn, I want to thank you for sharing your story, which is a very personal story, as well as your book, where you share more of your story, as well as talking more about recovery. And I hope people will get a copy of Addiction is a Family Disease by going to addictionisafamilydisease.com, going to Amazon. Is it yet available in Audible form?
No, it's not. Not yet. We're working on that as we speak.
Well, you and I may need to talk after this program because I produce them, and it's a lot of
Great.
fun. I got to tell you, it really
Oh,
is.
great.
Art, I thank you for sharing, and I do have three final questions I ask all of my guests.
Yes.
I'll ask those of you in a moment, but first I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spreaker. There's a link at richarddugan.com to Spreaker, where you can go and listen to these podcasts. We're on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope you will subscribe as well as click notification so that when a new conversation is posted, you will, of course, be notified. A reminder that my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, is available on Audible. It's available on Amazon. Audible is coming soon. It's in paperback, hardcover, as well as Kindle. And we also encourage you to, if you can, if you are inclined to do so, we have a PayPal account where you can leave us a tip. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And finally, we ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place, to listen to that still, small voice. Art, we're going to have you back to talk about that aspect of the mental health and wellness aspects of addiction as well. So I hope that, folks, you will do that. And with all of that, we go to our final 3 questions for our very special guest. And the first of those questions is, who is Art Dielhenn?
Art Dielhenn is a happier guy than he used to be. Art Dielhenn is a guy that enjoys life, lives without fear, and is remarried, and loves his kids, and loves to be of what service I can. I've had a lot of opportunity in my life, and it's a pleasure to give back. And by the way, my book, all profits from the book, beyond the production of it, will be donated. So I'm not making a dime off of this book.
Very nice. What gets you up in the morning?
What gets me up in the morning is purpose, to share, to be of service, to live life fully. You know, when you live in fear your whole life, you live a very restricted life. And now I'm taking risks and doing things I never thought I could have done. And it's a real joy to really eat life whole, you know, to really take a bite and enjoy it. And curiosity is another thing. I'm curious about a lot of things, and that's fun too. It's like, what's the new day going to bring?
Well, there's a quote in my book. I think it was from the author McKinney, something along those lines. Anyway, it talks about how life, when you come to the end of your life, it's not that you end your life with a body that's pristine, that's perfect and everything.
Right.
Actually, you're racing to the finish line with a fistful of chocolate-covered strawberries in one hand, a glass of champagne in the other. You slide in going, wow, what a ride.
Right.
And that's what I hear coming from you. Final question. And I think I know what this answer might be, but it may not. What was your best day?
Today. Today is my best day. And the moment I'm in is the best moment. You know, I spent a lot of time in the past. I spent a lot of time anxious about the future, regretting the past. And now I just try to be in the moment and savor every single one.
Well, I am glad you were here in the moments that we have been together here on this program. And again, I thank you so much for being a part of what we're trying to do to change the world for the better for everyone. And
thank you.
And
it's been a pleasure, Richard.
And I thank you once again for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I will see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.